Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I am your host of Killer Instinct. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday and you are not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. Now, if you guys have been keeping up for the past couple months, you would know that for the year of 2024, we have been dedicating every single month to a different true crime category. We have covered unsolved cases, celebrity cases, serial killer cases. Last month, we did sadistic stalkers. And for the month of August, we have dedicated this month to female killers. For the past few weeks, we have been talking about some of the deadliest women in America, and today's case is no different. As you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are discussing the brutal and tragic murder of Ryan Poston. Ryan was only 29 years old when his life was ended in the year 2012. I am very, very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this case, what your thoughts are about this case. So with that being said, let's jump right on into it today. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to his parents, Lisa and Jay. Now, Ryan was the eldest of 4 children and had 3 younger sisters, so including his parents, they were collectively a family of 6. Now, Ryan's parents did end up getting divorced when he was younger, and his mom went on to remarry a man named Peter. Now, Ryan was very close to his family as a whole. That is something to know about him, is that he was a family man. His family was his world. They were all very, very tight-knit, and Ryan had a very special bond and relationship with each and every one of his family members. Now, Ryan and his father, Jay, specifically shared a very special bond. They had a very close relationship. They had that traditional father-son bond that really anyone would ever dream of. They were incredibly, incredibly close. But Ryan was also very close to his stepdad, Peter. He really looked up to Peter and saw him as a second father figure in his life, so much so that Ryan ended up legally changing his middle name to Peter's last name. So once he got that name change, his legal name became Ryan Carter Poston. Poston being his father's last name and Carter being Peter's last name. He really had these 2 prominent male figures in his life who he looked up to, and both of them equally loved and adored Ryan as well. Now, everyone who knew Ryan said that he was incredibly smart. Ryan initially attended Indiana University, where he triple majored in history, geography, and political science. At this point, he decided that he wanted to have a future career as a lawyer, so he went on to law school at Northern Kentucky University, where he graduated and then began working at a prominent law firm. The firm that Ryan worked at mainly worked on civil law, and Ryan was incredibly successful at his job and had an extremely bright future ahead of him. Now, friends of Ryan claim that Ryan was the type of person that whenever he walked into a room, he captivated the attention of everyone. Ryan had this energy about him where everyone just gravitated to him. Everyone wanted to be around him. He was charming. He was nice. He was kind. He was said to be the type of person that everyone would want in their corner in their life. Now, this case really begins in March of the year 2011, and on one particular day in March, Ryan was scrolling through his Facebook feed, and upon doing this, he stumbled across a profile of a girl who he had several mutual friends with. Ryan thought this girl was attractive and decided to reach out to her over Facebook Messenger, and the girl responded, and the two of them started talking over Messenger. That led into exchanging phone numbers and began texting one another, and And then the two met the following month in April of 2011, and ultimately they started dating. And the girl that Ryan was in a relationship with was named Shayna Hubers. Shayna Hubers was born on April 8th, 1991, in Lexington, Kentucky, to her parents, Sharon and Robert. Now, growing up in high school, Shayna was said to be both equally academically brilliant and creative in the arts. She was very book smart, she got straight A's, and was in almost all AP classes. She graduated cum laude from the University of Kentucky, where she studied psychology in only 3 years and was training to become a school guidance counselor. But she also loved the arts, like I said. She loved singing, she also loved acting, and she loved theater. Friends of Shayna's and people who knew her all throughout high school claimed that Shayna was very friendly, she was kind, she was nice. She really did seem like your girl next door. However, there was another side to Shayna that her friends saw, and that side was Shayna being boy crazy. Now, Shayna was in high school. She was going through the first beginning stages of life, having boyfriends and relationships, feeling all of these feelings all at once. However, Shayna's friends said that her behavior definitely surpassed what would be deemed as your typical high school romances, your typical boy crazy. It wasn't anything that was deemed quote unquote normal or, again, typical. Shayna's behavior was definitely deemed obsessive. She would find a boy to infatuate over, she would become obsessed with them, and if that boy did not reciprocate that same type of desire towards Shayna, if they did not like her as much as she liked them, if she felt rejected by them, she would in turn lash out and she would throw tantrum like fits. She would start screaming, she would start yelling, she would make a scene, and she would always take things to the extreme. And the people who knew Shayna accredited this behavior to Shayna seeming like the type of person who was never really told the word no. Shayna was very used to getting her way, and she would do whatever she had to in order to get there. Now, I want to circle back and talk about Shayna's relationship with Ryan in particular, because that is what we are talking about in this case. Now, in the beginning of the relationship with Ryan, Shayna seemed very happy towards her friends. She was excited about Ryan. Ryan seemed like a really great guy. He had all of these amazing things going for him. He was successful. He was smart. He was a great looking guy. He was charming, nice, funny, all of the things that Shayna wanted in a partner. However, over time, both Ryan and his friends, as well as Shayna's friends, said that there were some red flags that were popping up in this relationship, and it quickly turned toxic. It's important to give context here as to what was really going on in the beginning of the relationship when things started. Ryan had recently gotten out of a long-term relationship, and when he met Shayna, he was definitely not looking for anything serious. He was looking for something more casual. He was looking to have fun, not ready to jump into another long-term serious commitment just yet in his life. Whereas for Shayna, that is what she wanted. She wanted a long-term relationship. She wanted a commitment, and more specifically, she wanted that with Ryan. So from the very beginning, the two of them were not on the same page, and over time, those red flags and the toxicity in their relationship really began to show. Now, it was very clear to Ryan and to really everyone else in his circle that Ryan was not able to give Shayna the type of relationship that she wanted or the attention that she needed from him. Shayna demanded Ryan's attention really at all times. If there was ever a time where Shayna felt like she wasn't getting the response from Ryan that she wanted, or just a response in general, she would send an overload of text messages, between 50 to 100 text messages at a time, until he would answer. She would begin calling around to his coworkers, his receptionist, his friends, his family, trying to get a response from him. Ryan did attempt to break off the relationship with Shayna several different times. He tried to break up with Shayna multiple times throughout the course of their relationship. However, they always found their way of getting back together. And according to Ryan's friends, they claimed that Ryan told them that this was really because it was easier to stay with Shayna and not have to deal with her outbursts every single time he would break up with her. Shayna herself texted her friends and said, quote, "He says he's only with me because I make him feel so awful about it when I cry, end quote. There was a part of Ryan that did not want to hurt Shayna's feelings and decided that the easier thing to do in this situation would just be to appease her for the moment and hope that things would work themselves out. However, it became this vicious and toxic cycle that was never ever working, and it resulted in a very unhealthy partnership between the two of them. Each time that Ryan would try and break up with Shayna, she exhibited that similar behavior that I stated before, where she would throw these tantrum-like fits, she would scream, she would yell, she would throw things, she would continuously show up to Ryan's place of work, she would show up to his apartment. Ryan texted a friend at one point saying, quote, "This is getting to be restraining order level crazy. She has shown up at my condo 3 times and refused to leave each time," end quote. But it also is important to point out that the people on Shayna's side, her friends, her family, they all claimed that Ryan was playing mind games with Shayna from the very beginning. Ryan was 28 years old when he met Shayna, and Shayna was only 19 years old at this time. And friends of Shayna claimed that Ryan used his age and his power as a manipulation tactic against her. Shayna's friends claimed that Shayna told them that Ryan was emotionally abusive and always commenting about her physical appearance, saying that she needed to lose weight or get plastic surgery, getting cosmetic procedures done to be more attractive for him. And those types of comments really got to Shayna's head. Now, I want to break down the timeline of this relationship so you guys really have a better understanding of where we started and where this relationship really ends and kind of what happened in between all of it. So this relationship started really in March of 2011. That is when Shayna and Ryan began speaking. They ended up meeting in April and were dating from April 2011 until November of 2011. Now, after November of 2011 is really when the on and off parts of the relationship began. This is when they would break up and then get back together. They would fight and then they would come back. It was just the up and down, on and off cycle that repeated itself. Now, Ryan did try, like I said, to break up with Shayna multiple times prior to the summer of 2012. However, once summer hit, they did start spending more time together. They were seeing each other more frequently. But by August, the relationship had become toxic once again, and Ryan made the decision that he was ending the relationship once and for all. Now, this decision to end the relationship, and really every time this relationship ended, was because of Ryan. Ryan ended this relationship each and every time and really tried to distance himself from Shayna as much as possible. However, things would happen, they would start talking, and they would get back together again. Even in their off periods, they would still spend time together. They would still hang out. Shayna would still find ways to get back into Ryan's life, and Ryan would let her. Now, after the tumultuous cycle of this relationship, Ryan was ready to move on. He wanted to start dating other people. He wanted to explore other relationships and move on past this chapter of him and Shayna. And this is exactly what he did. One of those people that he began talking to was a former Miss Ohio USA named Audrey Bolt. Audrey and Ryan began talking in January of 2012. They met via Facebook when they became friends on the site. Now, they never actually began messaging one another until sometime later when Audrey posted a status asking her Facebook friends for movie recommendations, and Ryan replied to the post. After replying, the two began direct messaging. Audrey claimed that the messaging between them was lighthearted and funny, and over time, that direct messaging led to texting for the next few months here and there. Now, obviously, as we know, Shayna and Ryan were together on and off throughout the year of 2012. It is unclear if there was any crossover between Ryan speaking to Audrey and then Ryan and his relationship with Shayna. From Ryan's friends and family's perspective, Ryan was always trying to find his way out of his relationship with Shayna and really uses the word relationship very loosely. It was never a serious commitment for him. And by the year 2012, he did seem to try and end the relationship relationship multiple times. It seemed like he had one foot out the door throughout the entirety of the year 2012. Does that excuse the behavior of stringing someone along and staying with them only because it is easier? No, but I do think it is important to just give context on all ends here. So now I want to move on to October of 2012 because this is when things really begin to take a turn for the worst. In October of 2012, Ryan and Audrey began making plans to meet with each other and go on a date. They planned on their first date being on the night of October 12th, and this night started out like any other. Ryan was at work for the day, and upon leaving work, he stopped by a colleague's office. This colleague's name was Lori, and he expressed his excitement to Lori about how he was moving on and he was going on a date that night with a new woman. Now, Lori had really seen the trajectory of Shayna and Ryan's relationship. She had seen Shayna's obsessive behavior. She had seen Shayna showing up to Ryan's place of work. She had seen the text messages between Shayna and Ryan. She had seen Ryan trying to break up with Shayna multiple times throughout the course of their relationship, and each and every time it did not work. And it was women's intuition that expressed Lori's worry to Ryan. She told Ryan that she was concerned, that she was scared for him. She said during this conversation with Ryan that she reminded him to be careful and that she was worried about how Shayna was going to react when she realized that Ryan was actually moving on with his life. You guys, someone please tell me how time is moving so fast because I cannot believe I'm saying this, but summer will not be around for most of us for that much longer. And I know that we want to enjoy what's left of the warmer, sunnier days and not have to worry about cooking or meal prepping. But luckily, with Factor's fresh and never frozen meals, they've got us covered. Factor's meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes or less. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Factor has so many options for us to choose from. They have keto, protein plus, calorie smart, and more. They have 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every single week, so you will always have new flavors to explore. Treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients while simultaneously keeping your kitchen time to a minimum. And you can feel confident knowing that you can still hit your wellness goals with ingredients that you can trust. So what are you waiting for? Head to factormeals.com/killer50 and use code killer50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code killer50 at factormeals.com/killer50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Lori told Ryan that she wanted Ryan to hire a locksmith to get over to his house and change the locks immediately for Ryan's safety, as she was there again to witness Shayna's obsessive behavior over Ryan. Now, Ryan reassured Lori during this conversation that he was okay and that he was going to get everything squared away. He was going to get the locksmith to come to his house. He was hearing everything that Lori was saying and agreeing with her over her concerns, but again, tried to make her feel like everything was good, he had it under control, and not to worry about him. Ryan then left that conversation, left the building, and drove home. But unfortunately, that would be the last conversation that Ryan and Lori had. Later that night, on October 12th, 2012, 911 operators received a phone call from Shayna Hubers reporting that she had just shot and killed Ryan at his apartment in what she claimed was self-defense. Shayna claimed that her and Ryan got into an altercation. She said, quote, "He threw me across the room. I was very startled. I was lying on the floor and I killed him." In the call, Shayna went on to say that the two did have a history of domestic violence and that the gun used in the murder was Ryan's gun, as he kept many loaded guns throughout the house. Now, interestingly enough, when the operator asked Shayna if she had any injuries, she said, quote, "I'm not injured, ma'am. I was thrown into the side of the couch," end quote. Now, this made the operator confused, and she asked Shayna how she wouldn't have any injuries if she was thrown into a couch couch as she claimed. But Shaina responded with, quote, "I don't have any injuries. I was just very frightened. He's a lot bigger than me, 6'3", 200 pounds. I'm 5'8", 120. He picked me up and kicked me out of the house. I told him, let me get my things at least if we're going to break up, and he wouldn't let me get my things. And then I reached around and tried to get my things. He threw me across the room. I was very startled. I was lying on the floor and I killed him," end quote. Now, obviously, based off of this initial 911 phone call, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of missing pieces in this story because that story that Shaina is initially telling this operator, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There are a lot of question marks in this particular story. However, there are certain things that could have prompted that. Shaina could have been in shock. She could have gotten a head injury. She could have had something happen where it would cause her to stumble over her words, not make too much sense at the time. So police knew that they needed to get to Ryan's apartment and get there fast to figure out what exactly happened. Now, when police arrived into the apartment, they saw Ryan's body lying on the ground behind the dining room table in the apartment. After an autopsy was conducted, it was concluded that Ryan had been shot 6 times all over his body. He was shot multiple times in the face, underneath his arm, his back, and his chest. So shortly after arriving to Ryan's apartment, police brought Shaina down to the station to answer a few questions that they had. Like I said, this was not a case of who done it. We knew at this point that Shaina was the one who murdered Ryan, but there were a lot of question marks, as we just mentioned, surrounding what exactly happened here. Now, when police brought Shaina into the interrogation room, immediately her behavior was very, very bizarre. When she was first brought into the room, she began joking around with police, laughing, making little side comments here and there. However, then her behavior shifted and she acted as if she was crying. She was making sobbing noises. However, there were no tears coming out. And once the detective walked out of the room, leaving Shaina in the interrogation room by herself, the crying immediately stopped. It was almost like a light switch, an on and off switch. Once the police walked out of the room, the crying was done. Now, interestingly enough, Shaina did ask for an attorney almost immediately after sitting down with police. And after doing that, the detective explained that that meant that he was not going to be able to really ask her any questions at all. And even though he was not able to ask her questions, that did not mean that Shaina stopped talking. In fact, it was the exact opposite. After asking for an attorney and being read her Miranda rights, Shaina continued talking, and she was talking and talking and talking. The detectives did not have to ask her any questions. She just kept talking, so much so that the detectives had to take shifts. They would have to switch in and out of the room. That way they wouldn't experience any burnout. And she was talking about everything and anything at this point. She was explaining what happened with Ryan. She was also asking questions about jail, asking if she was going to be able to shower while she's in prison. She was also asking the detective if he had gotten any dental work done, just very all over the place with what she was saying. Now, all in all, Shaina spoke to the detectives for over 3 hours. And while she thought she was helping her case by talking to police and giving them all of this information, it really would only come back to bite her. With all of the time that Shaina spent talking, she was giving police contradicting stories. For example, one of those stories being how Shaina obtained Ryan's gun. On the 911 call, Shaina told the operator that she got the gun after wrestling it out of Ryan's hands. However, when talking to authorities, she told them a different story. She told them that the gun was actually placed on the dining room table, and it was Shaina who grabbed it off of the dining room table and then shot Ryan. So again, these are two very different stories and not close enough to where there is a truth in the middle. These are two very completely different stories. Shaina also talked about how gruesome the murder was. I'm going to play an audio for you guys of her describing the actual shooting of Ryan.
And I just picked up the gun, and in the middle of him doing something with his arm or saying something crazy, and shot him. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? You know? And he was laying with his face on the table, like twitching. And so I knew he was going to die a very slow and painful death. I knew he was already dead, you know, and within the next 20 seconds. So in the next 2 minutes, I knew he was going to be dead. And he was in a lot of pain. He was twitching, he was moaning, but he was ultimately dead. And so I shot him enough times to kill him so that he wouldn't suffer at that point, which was a few more times. And I shot him, I think I shot him twice, thought he was completely dead, and he was laying there still, twitching and making noises. And I shot him in the head. I probably should have left it there, but I knew he was going to die. Mm-hmm.
So as you can hear, Shayna describes how after initially shooting Ryan, she watched as his body laid over the dining room table, twitching and moaning. She then says that after that, she walked around the table and shot him in the head again. And from her account, she says that it was probably 6 times. Now, during this 3-hour interrogation with Shayna, when police would leave the room, leaving Shayna alone, Shayna's behavior was very bizarre. And this definitely reminded me of Jodi Arias's behavior. We just covered the Jodi Arias case if you have not heard it already. However, we covered her case and she had very similar behavior in her interrogation. And when Shayna was left alone, she began dancing. She began doing pirouettes in the interrogation room. She also began singing Amazing Grace. And she was dancing around the room saying, "I did it. I did it." Now, ultimately, Shayna was arrested and charged with Ryan's murder. Now, something that I do want to mention that is critical to this case that we're going to talk about throughout the rest of it is something that really changes the trajectory when you look at the facts. And this is pertaining to the 911 call. Shayna claimed on this 911 call, and she again admitted it to police, that she waited 10 to 15 minutes after shooting Ryan to make this 911 call. 10 to 15 minutes. She didn't shoot Ryan and then call 911. She shot Ryan and then waited 10 to 15 minutes. Now, if you're sitting here wondering, what did Shayna do in those 10 to 15 minutes before calling 911? What we do know is that Shayna called her mom, Sharon, right after shooting Ryan. Now, according to Sharon, she claims that Shayna called her very frantic. She explained that she had shot Ryan in self-defense, and Sharon responded by telling her daughter that she needed to call 911 and tell them where she was and exactly what happened. And Shayna claims that that is when afterwards she called 911. Now, this struck police as very, very odd because why would Shayna call her mom instead of calling the authorities? This is the man that she claimed to love, and she's watching him die on the floor. And instead of calling the people who could potentially help save his life, she is calling her mom instead. 10 to 15 minutes is critical time. That is life-saving time that we are talking about. And instead of calling the people who could have potentially helped save Ryan, Shayna called her mom instead. And a lot of people believe that is because that, one, Shayna wanted Ryan dead. Shayna didn't want Ryan to have a story to tell. Shayna didn't want Ryan to be able to tell what actually happened that night. And so that is why she did not call. Now, when police asked Shayna why she didn't just call police after shooting Ryan once, why did she have to shoot him 6 different times? Shayna said, quote, "I knew he was going to die or have a deformed face. He's very vain and wants to get a nose job. He's just that kind of person. And I shot him right here," pointing to her face. I gave him the nose job he wanted, end quote. When police heard that, their jaws were on the floor. They could not believe that someone would actually say that. They could not believe that those words were actually coming out of Shayna's mouth to tell and to say that she gave him the nose job that he always wanted. That is a wild, wild statement to make. So now let's move on to the actual investigation of this case. And police started by looking into the cell phone records of both Shayna and Ryan. They looked at the text records as well, and detectives have claimed that up until this point of their careers, they had never seen as many text messages in an investigation as they did between Shayna and Ryan. They claimed that the text messages between them added up to the hundreds of thousands, and they said that the majority of those text messages were in fact sent by Shayna. They claimed that for every one message that Ryan would send, Shayna would respond with 50. They saw that in those text messages, Ryan asked Shayna multiple times to stop contacting him, to leave him alone, and pleaded with Shayna by telling her that she could tell everyone that she broke up with him, that she was the one who put her foot down, that she ended the relationship if that would make her feel better about the breakup, but that never did. Now, in August of 2012, when Ryan tried again to end the relationship, he texted Shayna saying, quote, I am padlocking the door, to which she responded with over 100 text messages. Ryan did not respond until 9 hours later, saying, quote, I'm not reading any of these. Please stop, end quote. Shayna's response to this was then to show up to Ryan's apartment unannounced, used her key to get inside, and when she refused to leave Ryan's apartment, he ended up going to his dad's house by himself and sleeping there because she would not get out. Now, if you're sitting here wondering that if this relationship was as tumultuous as everyone is making it out to seem, if it was as toxic as everyone is making it out to seem, if Ryan really wanted to get away from Shayna as much as everyone is trying to make it seem like he did, if he wanted to end the relationship as badly as everyone is making it seem like he did, then why did he not get a restraining order? And according to the police, at this particular time, Ryan was not able to get a restraining order against Shayna for a multitude of reasons, one of which being that in order to get a restraining order against Shayna, both Ryan and Shayna would have had to have been living together at some point or married, which neither of them were, so he would have been disqualified for that. He also did not have any medical records. He did not have any police reports. It really was just a constant level of harassment and borderline stalking that Ryan was experiencing. And so because of that, he would not have qualified for a restraining order against Shayna. So with all of this being said, with all of this information, I now want to move on to the trial of this case because Shayna pled not guilty to murder in this case, and the trial began in April of 2015. So this was about 2.5 years after the murder, and Shayna was unable to make her bail, so she was required to stay in jail throughout the duration of that time and during that period leading up to the trial. Now, Shayna's defense team from the very beginning claimed that Ryan's murder was an act of self-defense. They claimed that Shayna was protecting her life in Ryan's murder, that she was terrified of him, and was proving that Ryan was the aggressor in this relationship. The defense brought up that Ryan was, at the time of this murder, being sued by a former law partner. They also brought up several Facebook posts that Ryan made, one in particular where Ryan talked about how he wanted to light the city on fire and leave the town to perish. Now, the defense brought all of this up to show that Ryan did have an aggressive side to him. He clearly was not this cool, calm, and collected guy that the prosecution was trying to make him out to be. Clearly, there was a side of him that could get angry, that could get upset. And while the prosecution wasn't denying that, their argument against this was that none of those messages were directed towards Shayna or any person at all for that matter. Yes, Ryan was in a legal dispute with a former law partner, and yes, the Facebook post posts were definitely aggressive. Ryan was saying things that showed he was angry, but at the same time, those were never being directed towards any one person, and they were certainly not being directed towards Shayna. Now, the defense also focused a lot about how Ryan was stringing Shayna along throughout the entirety of their relationship, and how the prosecution was going to paint Shayna as this boy crazy and obsessed girlfriend who could not let her ex go. However, Ryan was equally and as equal of a participant in the relationship as she was, constantly stringing Shayna along and continuing to get back together with her each and every time. Now, the defense also brought up that on the night before the murder, on October 11th, Shayna and Ryan actually spent this night together. Ryan had brought Shayna over to his parents' house the night before the murder to watch the vice presidential debate that was on that night in 2012. After watching the debate, the two went back to Ryan's apartment and spent the night there. Now, the defense talked about how this was a clear indication that Ryan was stringing Shayna along, and if Shayna was really as bad as the prosecution was trying to paint her out to be, why would he do that? Why would he bring her over to his family's house? Why would he do all of these things if he was trying to keep Shayna away constantly over and over again? And unfortunately, this is one of those questions that we will just probably never have the answer to. And I think it is fair to say that at certain points in the relationship, Ryan was stringing Shayna along. He did continue to have a relationship with her when maybe he knew that it wasn't going to work long term and he wasn't going to be able to give her what he wanted. However, does that excuse Shayna's behavior? Absolutely not. Now, something that was also very interesting that was brought up during this trial was this period between October 11th and October 12th. As I just said, Shayna and Ryan went over to Ryan's parents' house the night prior to watch the presidential debate on the 11th. Now, at approximately 3 a.m. on October 12th, this was again Shayna and Ryan spending the night together at Ryan's apartment after this vice presidential debate. At approximately 3 a.m., Shayna called her mom Sharon. And while it wasn't exactly clear what was said in this phone call, Sharon claims that it was obvious to her that her daughter needed her. Sharon said, quote, "She was sick, she was in pain, and there was fear in her voice," end quote. Whatever it was that she heard in Shayna's voice, it prompted Sharon to drive the 2 hours and arrive to Ryan's apartment at approximately 5:30 a.m. on October 12th, and Shayna let her mom into the apartment. Now, the two sat on Ryan's couch and talked for some time until Shayna's anxieties calmed down, and afterwards, the two went shopping together, and then Sharon dropped Shayna back off at Ryan's apartment later that afternoon on the 12th, just before the murder. Again, this was hours before the murder. And again, this was the same night that Ryan did have a plan to go and meet up with another girl on a first date. So again, this is another example of the intentions of this relationship not being the same for both Shayna and Ryan. Now, the defense really tried to paint this picture that Ryan had snapped on Shayna, that he had snapped, that he had become this angry aggressor on the night of October 12th after she was dropped back off at his apartment by her mom. Now, in Ryan's apartment, when police arrived on the night of October 12th after the shooting, there was no evidence or no sign of a struggle. There was nothing knocked over. There was nothing that seemed like it was out of place or out of sorts. Again, Shayna had made many accusations. She claimed that Ryan threw her into the couch at one point. She claimed that she got thrown into a bookshelf at a different point in the night. However, nothing in this apartment showed those accusations to be true. The bookshelf, everything was kept in the bookshelf. There were little tinctures and little trinkets that Ryan had kept, but everything was still in its place. Nothing was knocked over. Now, the prosecution did bring up a different perspective in this case in regards to how Shayna viewed her relationship with Ryan and how it could have ultimately led her to snap and end Ryan's life. The prosecution claimed that Shayna viewed the relationship with Ryan as a failure, considering it was not working and the two were always on and off, and to her, failures did not exist. Shayna never failed in her life. She was always in the best classes. She got the best grades. She was in all of the theater performances. She was talented in everything that she did, and she always got what she wanted, but she wasn't able to have Ryan, and that drove her to an obsession and ultimately drove her to murder. Now, Ryan's neighbors testified in this trial, and these neighbors lived right underneath Ryan's apartment. And they testified that on the night of the shooting, they heard 2 shots coming from Ryan's apartment, followed by 4 more shots about 6 seconds later. They testified that they did not hear any screaming or yelling prior to the shots being fired. There didn't seem to be any sign of a struggle. They claimed that if there was a physical altercation, if there was wrestling, if Shayna was being thrown around as she claimed that she was, they would have heard those noises, but they said that they did not hear anything leading up to those shots being fired. It was also revealed in the trial that 11 days prior to Ryan's death, Shayna texted a friend of hers saying, quote, "When I go to the shooting range with Ryan tonight, I want to turn around, shoot, and kill him, and then play like it's an accident," end quote. And clearly the foreshadowing in this text is incredibly eerie. It shows that Shayna had these thoughts prior. It shows that Shayna had thought about killing Ryan on another occasion. That type of text is not a joking text by any means. Shayna also texted another friend shortly before the murder saying, quote, "Ryan's been begging me to ask you if you could do his veneers, but please F them up for me and make him ugly so he'll never get another girl. I hate him." And again, this was the prosecution's way of trying to portray Shayna's not only obsession with Ryan, but her idea that if I cannot have him, no one else can. Now, there were also 3 women who testified in this trial that were previously incarcerated with Shayna. Now, these 3 women did not receive any incentives by testifying against her in this trial. They purely did it because they wanted Shayna to be held accountable in what she had done. Now, these 3 women claimed that when Shayna was describing to them the murder and what happened the night of October 12th, Shayna told them that she was trying to make loud noises in the apartment to make it appear like Ryan was abusing her. They claimed that Shayna explicitly said that the motive for the shooting was because Ryan wanted to leave her and go on a date with another woman that night. One of the women claimed that Shayna told her that on the night of the shooting, Ryan did try and get Shayna to leave multiple times. However, that did not work. So Ryan attempted to lock himself in his bedroom to try and separate himself from Shayna. However, Shayna picked the bedroom lock with a bobby pin. And again, these women are claiming that this was what Shayna told them about what happened. So all of these things that they're saying are what Shayna said. Now, the 3 women claimed that Shayna told them that she was going to try and plead insanity in her trial, but then she retracted that because she said that she was too smart and had an IQ of Einstein. So instead, she was going to plead the quote unquote wife battered syndrome. Now, Shayna also testified in her own defense at her trial, and while on the stand, she admitted that during the relationship with Ryan, she did exhibit some obsessive and controlling behaviors. She claimed that she would look through Ryan's phone as well as go on his Facebook page and block other women who she felt were a threat. She would also reach out to Ryan's neighbors to make sure that Ryan was home whenever she was not in the area. It was also revealed that in one of their breakups, Shayna faked a heart condition to get sympathy from Ryan and prevent him from ending the relationship, in turn, trying to guilt him. Now, when talking about the night of October 12th, Shayna claims that after her mom dropped her off at Ryan's apartment, her goal was trying to talk to Ryan again. The two had left on bad terms after Shayna's mom had come to pick Shayna up that morning. The two were texting all throughout the day. Ryan had tried to get Shayna to leave her alone and to not come back to the apartment. However, Shayna wanted to talk to him. Shayna said that when she arrived at the apartment to talk to Ryan, Ryan became very angry. He started calling her names, saying insulting things to her, and called her crazy and unstable. She went on to say that typically Ryan's eyes were very blue, but that night they were completely black. Shayna said that she walked into the bedroom to try and retrieve her belongings and leave after she decided that she did not want to be there anymore. However, that is when she said Ryan grabbed her by both hands, picked her up, and threw her into another room. She claimed that in this tussle, Ryan somehow fell on top of her and was jerking her body around while screaming at her. She said that she was able to free herself from underneath him, but they continued wrestling while standing up afterwards. Shayna said that while she doesn't completely remember what happened next, she does remember that Ryan pushed her onto the dining room table and pointed his gun at her and told her that he could kill her and get away with it. She said that at that point, he put the gun down on the table and walked around to the other side of it and sat down. And during that time, Shayna grabbed the gun from off the table and shot him. She said that after the first shots, he let out a loud noise and sounded like an animal, and it scared her. So she walked around the table to where Ryan was now lying face down and continued shooting him more. So that is what Shayna claims. That was what she testified to during her trial. There were many different stories that Shayna had said leading up to trial, but this was the one that she was now sticking to. But the prosecution, on the other hand, they paint a different story as to what they believe happened this night. The prosecution claims that they believe that on the night of October 12th, Shayna went over to Ryan's apartment after Ryan told her he had not wanted to see her for the remainder of the weekend. They believe that when Shayna showed up, there was an argument between Ryan and Shayna, and that Ryan went into his bedroom and locked the door to distance himself from her, but Shayna responded by picking the lock with the bobby pin. And again, that story does line up with the other women who were in jail with Shayna at the time. Now, afterwards, the prosecution believed that once Shayna entered into the bedroom, the two began arguing, and that argument moved into the dining room, where they were both on opposite sides of the table. And on that dining room table was Ryan's gun. Now, it should be mentioned, and we have talked about it prior, however, again, I want to emphasize that Ryan did have licenses for his guns. He also had a conceal and carry license. He was known to keep guns in his apartment. However, everyone who knew him said that he was very safe with his guns. He always had the safety feature on his guns on, and he frequently would, when he got home, put his gun on the dining room table. That is where it typically always was, so it was not uncommon for the gun to be there. But continuing on with the sequence of events, the prosecution believes that while Shayna and Ryan were standing across from each other at the dining room table, Shayna grabbed the gun, turned the safety feature off, and shot Ryan in the head, leaving his face to fall right on the dining room table. They then believe that Shayna came around the table and continued shooting Ryan multiple times until he fell on the floor. And the prosecution really emphasized in this case that Shayna shooting Ryan as many times as she did really does contradict her argument of self-defense. Ryan did not need to be shot as many times as he was. It was an overkill. Shayna shooting Ryan as many times as she did, shooting him 6 times, was overkill, not self-defense. Now, it was brought up by the prosecution that during Shayna's initial interrogation with police, she told them, she voluntarily gave this information, that prior to shooting the gun, she turned off the safety feature. Now, for the prosecution, they argued that this showed premeditation because, for those who are not aware, when the safety feature of a gun is on, it prevents you from pulling the trigger. In order to shoot the gun, you have to release the safety. It's an extra step that you have to take. And Shayna telling police that she turned that safety feature off showed them and really told them that she intended on killing Ryan. This was premeditated. Prosecution argued that this wasn't a case of Shayna just pointing a gun at Ryan, trying to scare him. If she really did feel like she was in fear for her life, she could have just pointed the gun at him and not turned the safety feature off. The safety feature was on prior to Shayna picking up that gun. However, she decided to release that safety. Now, the forensic evidence on the gun also showed that there was blood spatter, Ryan's blood, on that gun, which again, the prosecution says that that showed that Shayna moved closer to Ryan during his final fatal shots. Again, just more so proving that overkill. Now, the prosecution also argued that in regards to Shayna calling her mom prior to calling 911, they believe that this was so Shayna and her mom could come up with a story as to what Shayna was going to tell police. And that is why when she was on the phone with 911, things weren't really making sense. The story wasn't really coming together. And they believe that that played a big part of that. Now, after closing arguments were made and after 5 hours of deliberation on April 23rd, 2015, Shayna was found guilty of the murder of Ryan Poston and was sentenced to only 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole after only 20 of those years. The judge also declared in his sentencing, and I think that it is important to note this, that he did not believe that Shayna was a victim of domestic violence at all. But shockingly, the case does not end here because Shayna was actually granted a new trial after her sentencing. It was revealed that one of the jurors on the panel had a concealed felony conviction, which Kentucky law prohibits felons from serving on juries. So Shayna got a new trial, and how that piece of information slipped by and this juror was able to serve on the panel is quite wild to think about. I don't know who slipped up in that process. However, because of it, Shayna got a new trial, and that trial was set to begin on September 18th, 2017, but it got delayed another 4 months until January 2018. However, at that time, Shayna asked for a new attorney, and that attorney was granted a 6-month delay to give him time to prepare for the trial. So the second trial began on August 8th, 2018, and the defense again tried to argue that Ryan was this abusive boyfriend and that Shayna was in fear for her life on the night of October 12th. The details were all given a second time. However, again, after 5 hours of deliberation, it was 5 hours the first time and 5 hours the second time, the jury found Shayna guilty of murder, and this time she was sentenced to life in prison. However, she did get the possibility of parole, and she will actually be eligible for parole in 2032. So in 8 years, she will be eligible for parole. She is currently being incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women, and that is where she will stay until her parole hearing. And that, you guys, is the case of the murder of Ryan Poston. And I am so curious to know where you guys fall on this case. I never like to really give my 2 cents on these cases because I like to just leave you with the facts and have you guys have your own opinions on them, and we can have an open conversation about it. However, I do think in this case in particular, it is very clear that this was a toxic relationship. I don't think anyone would argue that. I think it's very clear that it was a tumultuous relationship. It was a cycle. It was breaking up, making up, going on for much longer than it needed to. However, wherever you lay and wherever your opinion forms on the relationship in and of itself, I think what's very clear and very true, no matter how you spin it, is Ryan did not deserve to have his life ended. Ryan did not deserve to be brutally murdered. Ryan did not deserve to be taken off this planet. And what happened to him, like I said in the beginning, is an absolute tragedy. But I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this one. And with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I'm your host of Killer Instinct. Make sure you guys go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. I will be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.